The Mets get bounced out of Milwaukee as their free fall continues. But with the latest Mets news that we'll be talking about right here on the channel, there could be some much needed help on the way very soon. Let's get into it. All right, Mets fans, thanks for joining me on this video. After almost a 2-week vacation for me on the road, I am back on the channel on the True Mets Talk Pod, talking Mets and giving you all my latest thoughts and opinions on the state of this team. Because, newsflash, unless you've been under a rock, it's not pretty. Before we fully get into this video and talking about the latest news and also a little bit of a recap of the Milwaukee Brewers series in which the Mets got swept recently, please do smash those thumbs up buttons, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and whether you agree or disagree with some of the stuff that I'm about to say in this video, comment your thoughts and opinions down below. Mets fans, I'm very curious what you all have to think about the current state of this team. And if you missed the post-game stream, the post-game recap after Game 3 between the Mets and Brewers, in which the Mets blew a 5-run lead, losing 7-6 on a walk-off home run that Edwin Diaz gave up, make sure to go check that stream out on the channel. I'll link it down in the description down below, because really, that stream summed up a lot of our frustrations of what's going on, right? 2 sweeps in a row for the New York Mets in which they got swept, right? They're not sweeping anybody, they're getting swept, and they have lost 7 games in a row as they are now 5.5 games back of the Phillies, which at this point seems insurmountable. Crazier things have happened. The Mets need to go on a run. 5.5 games, really, in the grand scheme of things, isn't all that much, but still, it needs to turn around, and it needs to turn around starting tomorrow, given that today is an off day at the time of this recording. But 7 games in a row that are L's, and the Cincinnati Reds are right on the Mets' tails in the wild card, I believe, only a game and a half back. So, although the Mets still hold a playoff spot at this very moment, that can change in a snap of a finger if they don't figure things out. And in this series, there is a lot of blame to go around. Lack of fundamentals, lack of length from the starting rotation. We'll get to that here in just a second, because that's where it really all starts, is the starting rotation. But, the bullpen being burnt out, the offense is just inconsistent. They did put up the necessary runs. 6 runs should have got the job done in Game 3, but the inconsistencies, especially with some of the guys up top and Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, just simply isn't a recipe for winning baseball. And we see that with the end results in which we're talking about right here. So, from start to finish, we can talk about catcher's interference. We could talk about a hit by pitch with bases loaded to drive in a run for the Brewers, right? At the hands of Brooks Raley. We could talk about, the manager decision, Carlos Mendoza's decision, because I know a lot of Mets fans want to talk about Carlos Mendoza putting Ryan Stanek in a high leverage situation in that middle game, which kind of, ended up backfiring. We could talk about a lot of things. Francisco Lindor missing a baseball up the middle. No sense of urgency from this team. Sean Manaea only going 4 innings, 4+ innings, I guess, because he failed to record an out in the 5th inning. We could talk about a lot of stuff that went wrong in this Brewers series. But the way to sum it up is that the Brewers are the best team in baseball for a reason. They don't have the most talented roster. I will say that up front. They have a young roster that is overachieving expectations right now. I'm sure even that fan base will admit to that. But they're on a heater, and they make minimal mistakes. And the Mets make a lot of mistakes. And that's why they got swept in this series. Each of these games, by the way, I was at Game 1 of this series. I was at Game 1. Starling Marte, whether you agree or not with leaving him in that situation, Tyrone Taylor on the bench, that simply can't happen. Now, there's nothing you can really do, right, if you're Marte, because the center fielder made a perfect play, but it's about the decision-making or lack thereof, and that's kind of what's frustrating this fan base, and I think that's why a lot of people are starting to talk about Carlos Mendoza. Now, let's be honest, and I've said this in the post-game stream yesterday, I don't think Carlos Mendoza is to blame. Yeah, he's made questionable decisions all season long. But at this point, with the lack of performances from the main guys, what else is he supposed to do? There's really not much else to do because he's been trying every combination that he possibly can, both pitching wise and offense, right? From the lineup construction side of things. So for me, Carlos Mendoza, even given some of the questionable decisions, particularly in the bullpen and managing the bullpen, at the end of the day, these players, the talent that this team has is supposed to go out there and produce, and they haven't. And this is not a new thing, by the way, right? This is not just some slump. This is an extended period of the majority of this season. And the fact that the Mets are still in the playoff spot is miraculous to begin with. And I'll take it all day long because really, they don't deserve to be. And that's just the bottom line. And the Mets are going back home to play a Braves team that has struggled, but is always notoriously pesky against the New York Mets, no matter what the record says. Now, in that series, I'm not going to talk about it. We'll probably do a series preview or a pregame on Tuesday before the series kicks off. But you have Clay Holmes going for the Mets in game 1, David Peterson in game 2, and Senga in game 3. These pitchers need to start providing length. That is where it all starts for the New York Mets. And Carlos Mendoza also said this in his post-game press conference interview, whatever you want to call it, after game 3, talking about Sean Manaea and just the starting rotation in general, giving a lack of length and therefore burning the bullpen out more so than they should. Even the new guys, Helsley, Soto, Rogers, these guys are all burnt out. And they just got here. That's a problem. And you can talk about, and we can talk about David Stearns' inability to build a competent enough rotation that leads to this and taking gambles on ifs in the rotation. And that's 100% valid. But Carlos Mendoza has what he has to work with. And he can't change that, nor can anyone else. And we'll have that discussion in the offseason about David Stearns and the philosophy. But right now, it's about trying to get back on track with what this team has. And you have your nucleus in the rotation, if you want to call it that, pretty much going in this series against the Braves. They need to get the job done against the NL East rivals. Holmes needs to provide length, even though he hasn't for the majority of the season. Peterson has been really solid. Hopefully he can continue those ways. And Kodai Senga needs to get back on track. That injury, the calf injury or the hamstring, whatever it was, with that Pete Alonso errant throw was what really seemed to derail this season if you're looking back at it at an objective lens and seeing where things started to fall off. But we need to get a locked-in version of Kodai Senga, and that needs to start against the Atlanta Braves. But, personnel on this team aside, let's talk about some exciting news here. Could there be help on the way? We're all talking about these prospects, especially from the pitching standpoint, and Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat, who have been at AAA already. And with that, given those names, there is more AAA talent on the way. And what was a very interesting move by the Mets and very interesting timing by David Stearns and the Mets, promoting 4 prospects from AA up to AAA Syracuse. And these names are as follows: Jonah Tong, Jet Williams, Carson Benge, and Ryan Clifford. All of these names have been producing really, really good numbers in AA. I think Jet Williams is batting 281 with an 850 plus OPS. I think it was around 860, 868, somewhere around there. Ryan Clifford, even though he strikes out at a very high clip, and I'll talk about Ryan Clifford here in just a second, because this is the most interesting name of them all to me. We know that Benge, Tong, and Williams most likely are going to be here for the long haul, given the positional needs. But Ryan Clifford, especially, is really intriguing for me and what the Mets have in store or planned for him on this team, whether it's this year or next year. And that obviously surrounds the discussion of Pete Alonso. But this is very interesting, Mets fans. It could mean something or it could mean nothing. And that's kind of where we're at with this organization right now. But what I will say is that the Mets have plenty of room on the 40-man roster to DFA some names and make room for any of these prospects that we're talking about. Brandon Sproat and McLean are surefires, should be surefires to make this team ahead of September. And hopefully make appearances in the postseason for this team if they hang on to one of these postseason spots that they're in right now. But what about these names that we're seeing that just got promoted to AAA? What is the plan with them, right? And by the way, we're talking about some names on the 40-man like Nick Madrigal, Max Kranick, right? You can make parallel moves to get them off the 40-man roster and get some of these guys onto the 40-man roster in order to call up ahead of August 31st at midnight, which is the cutoff for when players could be eligible for the postseason should the team get there. So that's what we have to work with. And obviously the service time manipulation is also a factor. I think a lot of people are talking about August 15th or somewhere in the middle of August where the service time, the Mets are able to gain another year of service time. I'm not quite familiar with that rule as I am some of the others, but that's kind of what we're looking at right here. But I always go back to this and I always scratch my head with the Mets' unwillingness and stubbornness of not calling up prospects when the team needs help. Other organizations have no problems doing it, even from AA. But the Mets historically, right? And the most notable one, the last time that I can remember that called up from AA to make a true impact on the team was Michael Conforto. But they just rarely do it. But then you have the Braves organization that has no problems with doing it. And we've seen a plethora of high-end prospects around this league make true impacts for their respective organizations this season. And you're also seeing that in Boston as well with Roman Anthony. So I think that it's gotten to a point. I know David Stearns doesn't want to panic. He wants to remain even keel, right? And preserve these prospects and build long-term growth and success. And I get that. And I get that. But this team still is in the middle of trying to figure something out and retain this playoff spot. So at this point, Mr. Stearns, desperate times call for desperate measures. And these pitchers especially, but also maybe some of these hitters in the minor leagues can make a true impact. Now, the pitching side of things is where I think the Mets are going to lean into a lot more than some of the hitting talent that the Mets have in minor leagues. And David Stearns even said this a couple of weeks ago, that there's no anticipation for any of these names with the bat, like Williams, Clifford, Benge, to get called up, as opposed to guys like Sproat, McLean, and maybe even Tong. And there's a clear path forward for these pitching prospects to come up onto this team because Frankie Montas needs an opener. And I think that that is 100% a tall tale sign that he is going to be going to the bullpen moving forward at some point, whether it's the next go around or the go around after that, because you can't keep deploying openers for one of your starters in the rotation. You might as well make them a bullpen arm. So that's where you can see the pitching talent come up onto this major league roster. But what would the Mets do if they think they need a spark offensively? Because Carson Benge, to be quite honest with you, given the AA numbers, I think he can come up and make a difference in a big way. Same thing with Ryan Clifford, who had 24 home runs in AA Binghamton. That's a true power bat. That's a DH-esque bat. Now, whether he's going to be playing first base for the Mets moving forward, depending on what Pete Alonso does this offseason, and if David Stearns and the Mets decide to re-sign or let him go, is a separate talking point that we will be getting into this offseason, rest assured. But with the lack of production from the DH spot for the Mets, I know Starling Marte has been having a lot better of a go-round the last couple of weeks with the bat and making a difference. But Jesse Winker's still on the shelf, and he has been for quite some time. I don't think that there's really any way for me to be confident in Jesse Winker, even if he does come back and produce and make a difference for the Mets. Could that be on a platoon basis an option for the Mets to bring Ryan Clifford up and be that lefty DH and platoon with Starling Marte. Now, I highly doubt it, but it makes you wonder. What really is the plan, and why did the Mets, production aside in Double A for these guys, why did the Mets choose now to promote them to Triple A? A lot of question marks still remain with this organization. I'm completely aware of that. There's a lot of baseball left to play, and this is what I will leave you all with. There's a lot of baseball left to play. Things can turn around in a hurry. The Mets can go on a run just like they did last season. We've seen it happen before. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it needs to start soon and preferably against the Atlanta Braves. And it needs to start with the starting pitching. They need to get it together. So I appreciate you all being here again. Smash those thumbs up buttons, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Check out all the previous content. Definitely appreciate it. And I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.